Hey everybody, Matt Barton with this week's Broker Minute or Two, part 3 of a series of important things you need to know from the Division of Real Estate's Q4 newsletter. Let's not waste any time. All right, so many have asked me about seller financing over the past year or two. Not surprising. The market changed, rates are higher, prices are higher, harder to qualify for loans, still have some sellers who may be willing to do seller finance. And for the record, seller finance is legal. It's not illegal. But at the same time, we need to be highly aware under our fiduciary of reasonable care for our clients, what the game is and what to pay attention to. And we're going to focus today on the due on sale clause that is in just about every deed of trust that has been issued in the last 30 years. You find one that doesn't, man, you're lucky. But anyway, Ben Kagi, one of the longtime investigators for the Division of Real Estate, put forward this article, and I'm not going to go through all of it, but talks about what are our duties when it comes to seller finance due on sale. And he cites some of the code, right? Here's the affirmative obligations. And by the way, this section starts with the licensee shall. Item number 6 in that section is before the execution of a binding lease agreement, disclosing in writing clients, agents, and those that they represent, and then a subcomponent, the existence or possible existence of a due on sale clause. So that's in code, right? And then it goes on further under that section D, the potential consequences of selling or purchasing property without obtaining authorization of the holder and underlying encumbrance. Let me stop there for a second. I had some of our own agents who weren't aware of these things, but there are actually some groups out there, individual agents, who this is quote unquote their specialty, and they use particular title insurance companies, and they like to use certain things like a contract for deed, which I'm going to come back to later. And they don't use the state approved, the Division of Real Estate approved seller financing addendum. They have created their own. Why would that be? Maybe because it's tilted in favor of their client. So the due on sale clause, also known as an acceleration clause, meaning acceleration, you got to get your house paid off really quickly, or alienation. If you don't pay it off, you will become an alien to your own property. Anyway, so lenders have this for a number of reasons. You can read it here on screen, but it's really to protect their financial interests. When they made the initial bet to lend money on this property, it was with buyer A. And now you're introducing buyer B that they had no chance to bet, qualify, et cetera, and that increased their risk profile. So that's why the due on sale. And here's the section I've been saying for years, and I've actually had to argue with some agents on this. And I'll just read it verbatim. In today's market, lenders have a huge incentive to call the mortgage due upon sale, and are indeed calling notes due, something the mortgage industry has not seen for decades. Interest rates have more than doubled in the past few years, and a lender now has a great incentive to invoke a due on sale clause to close out a low interest rate loan. I've been saying this for years. And you know what I still get from agents? I've been doing this for 30 years and I haven't had a note called due. Yeah, well, that's because for the last 20 years, rates have been at 3% and kind of stuck in that range. So anyway, I'm not going to read through the scenario for sake of time, but it kind of talks about this. I will just go to the tail end question, which is, if this happened, typically the buyer and the seller the buyer can't qualify to pay off the due on sale, which they're required to do per the seller financing addendum, and the seller typically has taken the money they got by way of down payment and invested it somewhere else, used it somewhere else, bought a new car, truck, whatever. And so there's not really a great avenue to now pay the rest of the mortgage to avoid foreclosure, and that creates all kinds of pain. And the question asked at the end here is, as the agent involved, did you adequately notify the parties of this possibility? How did you clearly and unambiguously document your notification with your client? What now is your responsibility? So let's quickly pull up the seller financing addendum. And yes, this is kind of like a heat map. The first one is important, then it gets more important. Seller financing this is the declaration on the seller finance addendum. Seller financing is a complex transaction governed by many state and federal laws. Then, a little more important, real estate brokers are not qualified nor licensed to ensure that the terms of this seller finance addendum comply with these laws, state and federal, And then the last one, most important, is so the buyer and seller strongly are advised to consult with a legal professional in regards to these items. I would make sure I read this to my client, seller or buyer. Anyway, it goes into main chunk sections. Not going to spend a lot of time, but the one thing on credit documents doesn't mean like a credit report. It means I'm issuing you credit. I'm issuing a loan. That's loan documents, right? And it talks about how is that going to be captured? Is it a note and deed of trust? Is it all-inclusive deed and trust, also known as a mortgage wrap or a wrap? And then I put in here in a box, be leery of contract for deed. These other groups that I talked about that are out there and specialize in they'll browbeat you and they'll tell you, oh, we do this all the time. It's never been a problem, blah, blah, blah. Contract for deed is especially precarious because there are no foreclosure requirements on this. So if a due on sale comes, or if you just even stop making a payment once or twice as the buyer on a seller finance deal, they can close it out. They don't have to go through foreclosure, and all the money that you put in to the property, improvements, mortgage payments, gone. So be really, and the translation for that is people get really pissed off when that happens, which means they tend to litigate, which means you get lumped in. There's connecting the dots. So anyway, if you're going to do this, make sure you read through this in detail with your client. The creating party of these documents, meaning the credit documents, can either be the buyer or seller, but there are ramifications for the creating party later on, right? And here's the big section to get to. There's not that the other parts are not important, but for the sake of this video, the due on sale, going to read it. As part of the seller's disclosure, as referenced in section 7 of the REPC, seller shall provide to the buyer a copy of the seller's underlying mortgage, the note, and an amortization schedule. If you don't provide those, you're in default, right? Buyer's obligation to purchase is subject to the review of these documents, blah, blah, blah. And then if, always pay attention to the small words, if, and or in contracts. If the seller's underlying mortgage becomes due as a result of this transaction, who's going to be responsible? Well, technically the seller is, because the note's in their name, but in regards to the seller finance, the buyer agrees to pay the remaining balance owed and due on the seller's underlying mortgage. In such event, the due on sale payment shall act as payment towards the principal owed on the note. And the important one here is these terms shall survive closing. Now let me ask you a question. Why is somebody doing seller finance in the first place? Most of the time, don't tell me your extraneous example, most of the time it's because they weren't able to qualify for a loan in the first place. So how are they going to pay off the note? I mean, if they had the money in the first place, they would have bought it cash. If they don't have good credit, how are they going to run out and get a note to pay off the amount that's due? And if you're the seller, if you went and spent the down payment money and all of a sudden the buyer is contractually obligated to pay it, but they can't pay it, you're still in a foreclosure situation. This gets really ugly really fast. And I'll come full circle. Not illegal, but as the professionals, we need to make sure we know the game. We refer to the appropriate professionals as indicated up above in orange, and make sure at all costs that the parties are aware of what due on sale is. Don't brush it under the rug and think, well, they signed a document, they should know. Yeah, that's never going to be enough. That's why when we go to Kahi's message, did you unambiguously document your notification with the client and what this all means? So I know this has been 3 broker minutes in a row that haven't been exactly warm and cuddly, but I hope this actually does provide value for you so that when these situations come up, you can be prepared. You can either go forward with confidence, knowing what the game is, the parameters, or you can appropriately, if it makes sense, appropriately advise your clients. I don't know if this is the best path for you, and here's why. So thanks for your time. I hope you have a great week, and we shall talk soon.